First, welcome. This is actually our first forum. That's a joint effort between the Public Safety Committee and ACPAC. The whole purpose of this meeting is for the chief to give his briefing on the reorganization. But the main thing is he'll give that, and then we're looking for feedback. So, questions. Okay, the only thing is, well, we'd appreciate it if you have a question, limit it to a question and maybe a follow-up question, and to let other people in on it too, so it's not dominated by only a few people. If no other further questions, by all means, come back up with another one, okay? But just, we don't want it to go, stay with one person and one idea. So, just to keep that flowing. If you don't get a chance to ask a question, or if you want some more information later on, we have a sign-up sheet in the back where you can put an email. And if you leave a question with us, there's cards back there, you can leave a question. We'll get an answer to that question, we'll get it back to you. Okay? Right now, what I'd like to do is have the ACPAC members introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Marcia Penrose, and I represent the 14th Ward.
Ray Moran from 12th Ward.
Carolyn Washington, member at large.
Jonathan Capra with the 8th Ward. Craig Wolf at large.
Oh, by the way, I'm Joe and Jemmy, I'm with the 7th. And the chair.
Hello, I'm Kelly Kimbrough from the Albany County Council, the 4th Ward Council member, President Pro Tem, Chair of our Public Safety Committee. The idea, like Joe said, is to have the chief put his plan out, have folks talk about it, make comments, be critical of it, whatever. But we're going to do this respectful, and that's why we're here. So what I'd like is for the Public Safety Committee members from the council to just stand and introduce themselves.
Sure. Tom Hoey, I'm from the 15th Ward.
Sonia Frederick, I'm from the 1st Ward.
Okay. So with that, and I'm Kelly Kimbrough, the chair, I'm the 4th Ward.
What about the other?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. There are other council members here present. We have the 6th Ward council member, Richard Conti, 9th Ward, Judy Doche.
Welcome to the 9th Ward,
Did I
folks.
miss anyone else? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson, 2nd Ward council member, 3rd Ward council member, Joyce Love. Did I miss anyone? You're 10th Ward council member. This is like your home court here, right?
No, it's Rudy.
It's not his board, but he does a lot of stuff here. But anyways, council member Owusu Nani. Okay, with that, let's turn it over to the chief.
I happen to do a lot of stuff here, too.
All right, and good evening, everybody. And
Oh, and I'm sorry, be remiss if I didn't mention the president of our Human Rights Commission, as we are talking about criminal justice, law enforcement issues, human rights issues. Dr. Brenda Robinson is also here with us.
all right, and thank you, and good evening again to everybody. And I'm so glad to have you all here. Just want to quickly go over some of the things that have been happening in the police department, some considerations that we had in terms of staffing and adjustments to the police organizational structure. And then, I'm here to take comments, suggestions, concerns, and things like that. I think it's important that we hear from the community when things like this are happening, and we're looking forward to that. I'm going to have at some point Lieutenant McDade also is going to join me to talk about parts of this plan also. But so what is this all about? So this is really an adjustment to the police organizational structure. We've heard that this is a reorganization and that it's a restructuring. I haven't really thought about it so much like that. I've been thinking about this, and my staff have been thinking about this as some adjustments that needed to be made to the organizational structure to make it more impactful, to make it more effective. And so I think it's important to go back to the beginning and how we got here and how we started. And this started back in September of 2018 when I was appointed chief here in the city of Albany. And I started going around to all of the neighborhood associations and having meetings with people in the community, having other community meetings that I attended, formal and informal discussions with people in the community, because I wanted to get a sense of what the priorities were in this community as it pertained to public safety. And what I found when I canvassed this entire city over the course of about a year is that 3 themes emerged no matter where I was in this city. There were 3 primary concerns. And visibility is in terms of police presence in the neighborhoods. Everywhere I went in the city, people told me they wanted to see more police officers in the community. They wanted to see more marked patrols. I've heard stories from people who have been here for 30 or 40 years, and they said that, years ago, we'd see a police officer regularly in our neighborhoods. We don't see officers in the neighborhoods. And traffic enforcement. Everywhere I went, that was an issue. Whether it was running stop signs, speeding, school zones, whatever it was, that consistently across this city, that was a concern. And then last, everybody talked about the importance of community policing. And they talked about where this community came from in terms of community policing, how it evolved in this city, what it's meant to people in this city, how it's helped with police-community relations. And particularly, people in this community were very, very proud of the Neighborhood Engagement Unit. We're very, very proud of the beat officers in this community. So, at the same time that I was canvassing the city during that whole year, I was also doing things within the police department because now I had a sense of what the community wanted. I had a sense of what the priorities were in the community. And so now I needed to know what's happening in the police department. Do we even have the capacity and the capabilities of giving this community what it has prioritized in terms of policing in the city? And so as I started talking with officers and non-sworns in the police department during the course of the year, a number of themes started to emerge. Some very troubling things I started to see in terms of internal operations in the police department. The very first one is one that we all know, and that is that the department is severely short-staffed. It was short-staffed back in September of 2018, and we continue to have that challenge. And what was so concerning to me over the course of the year was what the officers were telling me about how they felt and how this short staffing was impacting these officers. What was happening professionally to these officers? What was happening personally? I was hearing consistently stories about officers simply because we didn't have enough staffing for a shift that was onboarding, having to work and being forced to work, being forced to hold over. I was consistently hearing stories about officers who had to work 30 or 35 consecutive days in a row simply because we didn't have the staffing when the shifts were onboarding to have minimum staffing out on the road. They were telling me that they were stressed. They talked about this concept of inversing. And inversing is simply when one shift ends, if we don't have enough staffing for the shift that starts that is immediately following, then we have to go back to that shift that's ending and go by seniority, low seniority, and order officers to stay over for that following shift. So what we were consistently seeing is a lot of these young officers, because of this inversing concept and their low seniority, they're being forced so many days in a row to work. They're missing holidays. They're missing family time. It was creating a tremendous amount of stress with the officers, and therefore it was presenting a tremendous amount of stress on the organization itself. And training. They talked about training. They simply were not getting enough training because a lot of it was we just simply did not have the staffing to take people out of service to do certain trainings. We didn't have the staffing to do in-service training. And they all wanted, just about every officer I talked to, they talked about their desire to have more training within the police department. Now, these two things alone should cause alarms any place, because those two things in combination are a recipe for disaster in the community if it's not checked. and if it's not corrected, and if things aren't put into place to minimize what's happening with those two things. Because if you have officers who are stressed, they're overworked, they're frustrated, and then in their minds, they're not being properly trained, that is a serious, serious problem. That raised serious red flags with me when I started hearing just those two things alone. And then, little stuff. The officers were telling me there's just no opportunities to move over and do different things. They can't go and work in the detective bureau. They can't do tactical stuff. Promotional opportunities were drying up. All those little things. Now, they seem like little things when we talk about it, but think about one of the problems that we're having right now, not just here, but in a lot of police departments across the country, and that's recruitment and retention. People come to places because of opportunities. It's an incredibly competitive environment out there for police officers. Everybody is hiring. Right now, and I was told that we're 50 officers short. And every single department around here is hiring. So we're competing with all of these different places. So what are these young recruits and prospective officers going to look at? Among other things, they're going to look at what kind of opportunities are there in that police department. If I go there, can I do different things, or I'm going to go there and get stuck on midnights for 12 years? Are there opportunities for me if I work hard and I take the classes I'm supposed to take and I go to school? Are there opportunities to get promoted? So that's what attracts people in, and it's what retains people as well. So that may seem like a small thing, but that's a huge thing in this competitive environment that we're dealing with right now, is recruiting people in and keeping them here. And that was one thing that officers consistently told me about the place. And then, they talked about the staffing imbalance. There are too many officers in one place, and there's just not enough others in other places, and it's creating stress in the department. It's creating stress in the organization. And, just in general, from top to down into line officers, they consistently told me that the organizational structure had some issues. Not because it was bad, but simply because times had changed. And the department had not assessed and evaluated the organizational structure in so many years. And so you end up having an organizational structure that worked maybe 5 years ago or 6 or 7 years ago, but as things changed in the environment, there was a need to assess it. And I was consistently told that we needed to take a look at our organizational structure to make sure that we're operating in the most efficient manner possible. And so, as I looked at it, after seeing what the priorities were in the community and seeing what some of the challenges were with officers in the department and what some of their concerns were, some things just kind of popped up. And, and it was very clear to me right away that the organizational structure was just unsustainable with some of the challenges, with some of the unique challenges that we're facing right now. The reason why some of those officers are working so many hours right now, and why some of these officers are being mandated to work some of these hours, is that we simply don't have enough officers in our patrol division to cover for vacancies and to cover for shortages. And so therefore, if somebody takes a day off, or somebody gets sick, or somebody gets injured, and we're short-staffed for a shift, we don't have enough officers to balance that. It was a clear imbalance. And so if we have, like we've had before, where a large number of officers retire or leave, because remember, in public safety, people get into this business, and after 20 years or so, it's time they retire and they go do something else. And so at any given time, you can have a large number of officers who leave the organization. It's just the normal retirement cycles in a public safety organization. But the organizational structure was just not sustainable for that type of dynamic. And so we had to have some adjustments so that if we have, which we will, we've had it before and we're going to have it again. There is going to be another time where we're going to have 15 or 20 officers leave at a time. Not because the place is bad, but because they've done their time. So what is going to happen then? Are we going to keep putting these officers through this cycle of every time we have people leave that now we're mandating these folks to work all these hours and put all these stress on these officers? Or are we going to look for to see if we can have an organizational structure that gives us some sort of balance during these sorts of times so that we don't have that sort of pressure? And then traffic safety. We just simply don't have the resources to do traffic. I'm sure pretty much everybody in this room has a traffic-related story. You have somebody who's run red lights or run stop signs or speeding in a school zone, and we get the calls all the time. We don't have the resources right now. We don't have the capacity right now to deal with all of those things. We've got to build this into our organizational structure. It's one of the highest costs for service that we have in this department. And if people are telling us that that is a priority, that's where most of our calls are coming from. We've got to have the capacity built into our organizational structure to deliver. We just don't have that right now. And then just routine patrolling. These officers want to work. They get into this line of business because they want to go out there and do all the stuff that you hear. They want to go protect and serve and all that stuff. But they don't get a chance to do a lot of that stuff because they're going from call to call to call. They finish one and they go to another. And they're doing this for an entire shift. They don't get a chance to go cruise through a neighborhood to see if there's something that's out of sorts in the neighborhood. They don't get a chance to go cruise through and talk to Mrs. Johnson about something that happened on her street. They don't get that opportunity now. We just don't have the capacity with the current organizational structure to give those officers an opportunity to do that. And I'm sure that most of you here want to see that. You want to see officers who have time to go and cruise through neighborhoods and just interact more with the community. And then we talked about this, the special assignments and the lateral transfers and the promotions. And so with all of that, then we have some other emerging challenges that we have as well that we've got to deal with, that this organizational structure is just does not give us an opportunity to efficiently deal with. We are going to, a lot of you may have heard that we've acquired a facility now that will allow us to train as many as 50 recruits at a time. One of the challenges that we've had over the years is that because we run our own internal academy, but we only have the capacity up until the next couple of months anyway, to train as many as 20 recruits at a time. That was our max. So we bring in 20. And then the 20, 16 or 17 will make it. And then once we get them out the academy, then we'll have 17 or 18 that will retire. We're constantly spinning our wheels. We're hiring, we're getting people in, but we just weren't keeping up with the pace of people who are leaving. And so now we have some exciting developments in that we now have the capacity to train as many as 50 recruits at a time. So with that, it means that we're going to have more recruits that need to be trained, and we're going to have not only those recruits trained, but some of the in-service training, the annual in-service training for current officers. That has to be taken care of as well. So with this expanded capacity is creating a need to have more training within our department. We've got to place some resources. We have to place some assets into training in order to accommodate this. Otherwise, we're going to bring in all these new people, and they're not going to be properly trained. And then we've got, obviously, the new legislation that we're dealing with. And the one that really concerns me the most, that impacts operations, is the new discovery laws. Well, we have to, within a certain period of time, have all of our discovery materials presented to the district attorney's office so that they can be in turn turned over to the defense attorneys. And so that has presented some challenges for us and some additional stresses, because now I have to allocate more and shift more resources into that area, because at the time of the enactment of when the new discovery laws were enacted, we didn't have the capacity. We didn't have the staffing to deal with that. The consequences, if we did not shift some resources there, were that we were going to lose cases. Cases weren't going to be prosecuted. We were going to have people who were victimized or their families were victimized, and simply because we didn't have the staffing to get all of this discovery material over to the district attorney's office, now some of that stuff may not have gotten prosecuted. we were put on notice by the district attorney's office that those materials needed to be over there, and so we had to. It was unavoidable. We had to shift resources in order to comply with these new discovery laws. And so, with all the challenges that we have, and with all of the emerging things that are happening in our industry, we put together a committee of individuals in the police department, sworn and non-sworn, ranking and non-ranking, from different stations within the police department, to get their perspective, a top-down and wide perspective of what our people within the police department, with their knowledge and experience working inside that police department, what type of challenges were they seeing? What type of recommendations did they have? And when we put this committee together, pretty much the only caveat we put with that is that any recommendations and assessments that they presented it was non-negotiable. Those recommendations must have taken into consideration the feedback that I received from the community over that year. Namely, that priorities were clearly traffic-related concerns. We needed more patrols in our neighborhoods, and we needed to maintain our community engagement unit and our beat officers. Those things were non-negotiable as they were assessing and evaluating the organization. And here's what they came up with, and a lot of it wasn't surprising. It was very clear from once they assessed this that a redistribution of personnel was necessary. It was unavoidable. There's no way that we can operate and that we could handle and deal with these challenges that we were having if we did not redistribute some of our staff. Clearly it was a staffing imbalance. And it was just a matter of where we were going to shift some of the resources and where those resources would be shifted to. And one of the things that we talked about, and this is what, very shortly I'm going to bring up Lieutenant McDade to go into more detail on this piece of it, was how we could transfer or redistribute some of our staff and still maintain our community engagement unit and our beat officer concept and in the integrity and the structure of that beat officer program. And again, Lieutenant McDade is going to go into much more detail on that piece. But we saw it as a balance between getting some staffing into areas of the department that can relieve stress, relieve personal, professional stress, relieve organizational stress, but at the same time allow us, and this is what's so exciting about this, allow us to even make that beat officer program even more impactful. And it sounds counterintuitive when you say that you're going to have fewer beat officers and they're going to have larger areas of responsibility, as Joe is going to talk about, and then at the same time say that you're going to make those officers in that program even more impactful. We're going to talk about that because there were some opportunities we saw as we assessed this, some opportunities to have this community policing ethic permeate the entire organization, to make this organization one in which there not one group of officers who say, this is what I do and I respond to calls for service, and you go over there and you deal with people and do all the community engagement. We saw an opportunity to make it where all of the officers, even the patrol officers now, will have the duty, the obligation to go out, engage with our community, work with our beat officers, work with our neighborhood engagement unit, and make that program even more impactful, and at the same time give us some relief, some much needed relief to keep this organization sustainable. And this pretty much is what we came up with, and Joe is, again, he's going to talk go into detail, much more detail about this. And it was pretty much a redistribution of personnel, a redistribution of a number of officers to certain areas, and at the same time providing some relief and providing some resources and support and training to our beat officers and our neighborhood engagement unit to make that unit even more impactful. I give Lieutenant McDade and his staff so much credit for taking a finite amount of resources. Because I've heard it said before, all you're doing is shifting resources or shifting the problem someplace else. You're just stealing from Peter to take Paul kind of deal. But when you hear this in detail, what he's talking about, it really was just a magnificent way of doing this and taking some limited resources and making an area even more impactful with fewer staff and making the entire organization even more sustainable. Give us an opportunity to be even more effective, more impactful in this community. And again, Lieutenant McDade is going to talk about that piece of it. And here's just some real quick benefits to this new way of structuring this organization. And you can see, it gives us more stability. Some of the things I talked about earlier. So now, with this new structure, with added officers in certain areas, if we have an influx of officers now and they leave 5 years from now or 2 years from now, we now have the capacity to still operate efficiently without placing that additional stress on the officers who remain. We can minimize the chances of officers now, when it happens, because this will happen. This is what happens in public organizations. And when it does, we can minimize the chances of officers telling us that they've been forced to work 35 days in a row, that they haven't seen birthdays, and they're missing holidays, and they're tired, they're overworked. We can minimize those chances. We can give these officers even more enjoyment at work, to do the things that they got into this business for. It maintains the structure and integrity of the NEU unit. And again, Lieutenant McDade is going to talk about that piece of it. And I talked about the officers, all officers in the department, practicing community policing principles. All officers embracing this. Additional resources and training given to our existing neighborhood engagement or beat officers. Traffic. We can now, once we start to repopulate, we can get that traffic unit back where it needs to be. We can get that traffic unit to a place now where it can be responsive to what's happening in the community. So when we get calls about folks speeding through school zones or habitually running traffic lights in a certain area, we've got some resources. We've got some staffing now to deal with that. Training, critical. With all the challenges that we have right now, if we don't train these officers right now and we don't get the proper training, it's a risk management issue for this entire city. We're going to put some resources and put some assets into that training unit so that we can take care of that piece of it. And then we got the officers in the neighborhoods, and we got professional development opportunities, and the executive team. One of the things that we did was create another executive position in the police department so that we can forecast it, so we can look at some of these high-level type situations that are occurring. So we can see, so we have more people in the upper level of the police department to look at trends, to look at best practices in the country, to look and see if 6 months from now there's some challenges that maybe we need to start right now adjusting for. So we put an additional person on the leadership team in order to deal with that. And then, last before I go to Joe, to Lieutenant McDade, here's some things that we're expecting. Again, we're expecting, and I'm 100% confident, especially, and I think you will be too once you hear from Lieutenant McDade, that we are going to have an even more impactful beat officer program. Less stress. Give these officers some better job satisfaction. This helps with recruitment. This helps with retention. You all may have heard also that we've lost some officers to other departments because of certain opportunities that they may see in other places. Well, let's do something about that. Everybody embracing community policing. You know, we're going to train. Training is going to be a key. And we talked about recruitment, traffic, and more police in our neighborhoods. So, yes,
You haven't mentioned anything about pay.
in terms of,
Salary.
Salary.
An
Yes.
increase.
That's on my list too. That's why a lot of officers that I believe are moving on to state jobs, et cetera,
yeah.
because the salary and the employment opportunities that's out there today with this tech savvy and all this tech stuff that's going on in our society, we're getting paid a lot more. So why would somebody who wants to come out straight from college join the police force at a salary that it is now, but is not competitive with everything else out there, which the job is a lot easier, is not high risk, and they know that hopefully they'll return home. So I mean, how do we begin to address that situation with the police department and the city that's and the people that are involved in that?
Pay is, absolutely. Pay is something that people take into consideration. Right now, from what I understand, our pay is not competitive with some of the surrounding agencies.
Correct.
And, you know, I've said this publicly many times. You know, our officers need to be paid at a competitive wage in benefits. They need to be compensated for what they do. Absolutely. Obviously,
So we don't get off the plan,
Okay.
right? So Lieutenant Medade still has to come up. We're talking, right?
Okay.
We'll get to the questions at the end. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, it's okay.
Oh, you want to take those last? You want to take the questions last?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. All right. So right now, then, I'll introduce Lieutenant McDade to go into more detail about the team approach to policing and how we're going to make some of these the unit more impactful and some of the other strategies that we have. With
Chief,
this.
introduce some of the other officers here that are here, so who's here.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, we've got Lieutenant Cliff Young back there.
Hi, I'm Cliff Young with Albany Police Department. I'm in charge of the South Station B shift, which is 8 to 4 down south.
And Deputy Chief Hogan's in the back. Steve Smith, a lot of you know him. Deputy Chief Hogan is back there, or Donahue is there. And our beat officers, you guys, sure that you guys know our beat officers here. All right, so I'll turn it over to Joe.
Hey everyone. I'm Joe McDade, I'm Lieutenant in the Engagement Unit, and I just kind of want to talk about with the reorganization, how we're going forward today. So today starts the first day of the training. We have a 4-day training we put together for the NU officers, the B cops, and the community service officers. So the idea is how we have the B's got expanded and less officers, we want to make them better trained. So they're better trained in your neighborhood so they can help you guys solve problems. One of the things that we're focusing on is a team policing concept. We're bringing patrol officers to do some community policing as well. Effective February 1st, patrol officers are going to be required to get out of the car and do a 20-minute foot patrol in the area that they patrol. Those locations are going to be decided by the lieutenant and the sergeant and given out to the officer at roll call during their assignment. An example would be like Officer Jones, your 101, your foot patrol, Central Robin, and all 19 cars are going to be doing that. 20 minutes does not sound like a lot of time for the officer to be out in the community, but 19 times it's going to happen on the day shift and the afternoon shift. The idea is we want the patrol officers to embrace the idea of community policing so they can also be seen out there helping you guys solve problems. The B cop alone can't do this anymore. They need help from the patrol division. So the idea of team policing is going to actually give you guys a better service. With the training that they're receiving over the next 4 days, the last 2 days is exciting. We hired somebody from California to come out and teach concepts of problem-oriented policing. Problem-oriented policing is a little different in the sense that it analyzes the problems and it creates long-term solutions and it teaches you, officer, how to solve problems. Do you guys have any questions on that with the training? What's that? Okay, I'm sorry. So we're excited about this. So in addition to the team policing concept with patrol officers getting out and walking the beat for 20 minutes, B cops are going to be required to do a 2-hour collaboration with the patrol officer in the patrol car. They're going to be required to get in the patrol car for 2 hours a week, ride with that officer, and kind of have discussions about what's going on in the area. Share information so the B cop can let the patrol officer know what's going on. So when a patrol officer does get out of the car and do their 20-minute foot patrol, they can engage the community and know exactly what's going on in the area.
You're using the term beat officer to mean something and patrol officer to mean something that I'm not sure I understand, nor necessarily everybody else.
So the beat cop is the officer that's assigned to the beat. They walk the beat and they ride a bike in the area.
So is that the neighborhood engagement officer?
Yes. All neighborhood engagement officers are the beat cops. For the 19 beat cops you have right now and the 4 community service officers. So they were the focus of the reorganization, and they're the ones that are receiving training today and over the next 3 days to get them better trained so they can give a better product to you guys.
And then what's a patrol officer?
They're the ones that ride around the police car answering calls for service.
So beat cops who develop relationships with the community where they're patrolling on foot, they have an idea of people at risk, who's at risk, and where trouble and hot spots might be, so that the patrol in the car has a better relationship with the community when they stop at these places. They have some idea of what they're going to, who they're going to meet, what they might see, how people might respond.
That's 100% accurate. Actually, you said it better than I did. So the beat cop has an intimate knowledge of the area that they patrol on foot and bike. With that information being on the beat, they get to know people who have issues, hotspots, areas that need more enforcement. So during that 2-hour collaboration in the patrol car, they're going to be sharing that information with the patrol officer who patrols that area. And the idea is to get the patrol officer, when he gets out of the car, so he can engage the community and try to address some of those issues that we're talking about.
Like, we've never seen anybody walking or riding a bike.
Where do you live? Like what area?
On the Scotland Road.
Okay. Upper New Scotland?
Yeah, out toward Corrections Academy.
So you don't have a beat cop per se. You have a community service officer. So
Yeah, well, we don't really.
well, the community service officers, they cover a larger area than where the beat cops does, and the community service officers are routinely not on foot and not on bike. They're handling bigger issues. But with the idea of team policing, we do want to get a patrol car to walk that beat where you live. So every area of the city, all 19 zones, whether you're in an area that has more crime or less crime, every area is going to have a patrol officer getting out of a car and meeting people, engaging the community. That's the direction we're going in. And in fact, on February 1st, you guys are going to see that.
Can you just repeat the term that you were having a consultant come in from California?
Problem-oriented policing. It's more about analyzing problems, figuring out why they're happening, using data with our crime analysis center, and formulating a plan to go after it. And one of the concepts of problem-oriented policing is after you develop a plan based on your analysis, gathering all the information you can, and figuring out why the problem is happening, is you develop a response plan. And part of the whole thing is the assessment, which is the final phase. After you develop your response and you execute it, assess it. Did it work? If it did, move on. If it did not work, come back to the table, reanalyze your data, get more information, develop a new response plan, and go after the problem. We're trying to get away from the idea of just rolling up on a corner, making an arrest, and moving on to the next spot. We want to solve your problems. We want to create long-term solutions. And this training is going to get the officers up to speed to do that for you.
I am really sorry I was late. So I missed your presentation because 5:30 is a horrible time to be communicating for parents.
Sure.
But, so if I ask a question that you've already answered, please feel free to let me know and I can talk to you later.
Okay.
I'm Karen. And I've been out of the loop for a long time, but I was really committed to the original ACPAC.
Okay.
And kind of the foundation of the ACPAC. And I moved away, came back. I've kind of been dormant. But what I've realized, the last couple of interactions I've had with APD, it seems like we're moving in the opposite direction. And
What direction are you referring to? What are we
well,
going in?
like I had a car accident. And there were issues with, visibility on the corner, shrubs. And at the time the officer showed up at the scene, I was a little traumatized, trying to take care of my kids. I really couldn't focus.
Okay.
So I called back to reach the officer, the supervisor. The supervisor was rude. And really didn't answer my questions.
Okay.
And then when I tried to go down there, and after calling several times, and the officer that was at the scene never called me back, another officer tried explaining it, but it still didn't make sense.
Sure.
And then I got frustrated because I said, before, and what really frustrated me is that at a certain point in time, I called and I said, well, who is the beat officer for that neighborhood? Because we really need to address the fact that there's a wall of shrubs obstructing Slingland Street and Oneida Terrace. And the officer said to me, well, there is no beat officer. I said, what do you mean there's no beat officer? Every major neighborhood has a beat officer, and this is in the city.
Sure.
Well, why is there no beat officer? And then eventually, oh, well, we don't have a evening beat officer. We don't have a daytime beat officer. I said, what's the difference?
Sure.
So that was really concerning to me.
Well,
because
that
it shouldn't have been that difficult to access someone.
I agree.
And I felt like people just didn't care.
So, going forward, on our city website, we have all the beats. And with all the beats, we have all the beat officers on that website and contact information for them. So, I apologize for the experience that you did have with our personnel. It's not how we conduct business in the city of Albany, and that could be addressed or should have been addressed by a supervisor. But going forward, all of our beats are filled, a daytime and an afternoon beat, with the exception of New Scotland Avenue, it's just a daytime beat. So with the idea of that, we're trying to embrace the team policing concept. We want you as a community to get a better product today than you did yesterday. The beat cops are fantastic then, they're going to be even better now, and you're going to have more access to them.
But you know what?
Right, well, okay.
I just wanted to help you out with that one.
Procedural question here.
What, I
When
just
I
wanted.
came in, I had to sign something saying that I could talk if I wanted to, and we're not following that.
Oh, should I have done
No. Are we going to do it or aren't we? Because I need to know, you're going to do your presentations, and then we were told to sign up if
Right,
we
right.
wanted to say
So,
something.
Dr. Gray, let me.
We're not doing
so,
that.
okay, so here we
I'm
are.
gonna sit through another
We're
one.
full-blown question and answer now. Okay, so you're in this. I'd like to acknowledge Councilmember Ballard Fahey, and Assemblywoman Fahey was also here. So we're open for questions. Dr. Green, you were first on the list. Your question.
I will yield to Dr. Green. I didn't know the process.
Dr. Robinson, you're after Dr. Green.
Can Lieutenant Young comment real quick? He wanted to kind of go on what I was talking about. He has some information.
No, I think you should do your presentation, and then, my understanding, then we could ask the question.
Part of my presentation is actually answering the question as to how operationally we're going to go forward. So if that's okay, that'd be easier for me if we could do that.
I just wanted to know, how did you come to 20 minutes, and what do you think that you're going to accomplish in 20 minutes moving forward? That's one conversation.
So there's research out there that dictates when you have a hot spot, 20 minutes of patrol officers' engagement in the community is worth more and does more than just putting a patrol car there for 4 hours or just having cops run in and run out. 20 minutes is a good number based on research that we figure will be successul for us.
Are
Okay,
you
no.
going to vary that so that...
No. We're going to try to go in order and not just jump around. Doctor, you have a question? Dr. Robinson?
Well, I have a,
You said I was first.
I thought you started talking and then Mr. Okay, you are first. Come on.
Well, I just wanted to follow the procedure that you set up.
Right. Okay. So right now we're in question and answer. You're the first questioner. Okay.
It was supposed to be economy. First of all, I thank you for doing this. It's wonderful for us to listen to what you have planned, even though the community was not involved in planning this, which I think they should have been. I think one important issue here when we talk about policing is making sure that there's transparency in the department, because that relates to trust and public safety. So I'm really concerned about what's happening now, and I don't know how this fits into your reorganization, but I'm really concerned that we're not as transparent as we used to be. That, and particularly with body cam footage, we've been asking for footage. There's a case now where a woman is asked for body cam footage, and the department is hiding behind 50A, which the appellate court said you can't do that. So I think the department is acting illegally. They are not giving the information based on 50A restrictions, which says that the public must have access to that information unless it's related to a personnel, a confidential personnel matter, okay? And you're not doing that. So we go through all this. If the community doesn't trust us because we're not being transparent, I think the whole thing would just fall apart. So I think right now the department is acting illegally because it's denying people access to those body cams under 58, which the court has said is not legal. And also the Center on Open Government has issued an advisory paper that states the same thing. So I really think you need to deal with that if you're going to do all of this. Okay? That's my comment.
Yeah, and thank you, Dr. Rainey, and you're absolutely right. I mean, with transparency. I mean, and now the issue that you just brought up, though, I'm not familiar with that particular case. But what I can tell you is what my direction to my staff has been as it pertains to the release of any of this information. And my direction is very clear, and that is we comply with the law. Now there are some pieces of when there are inquiries and when there's requests for information. And when those come up and there are legal issues involved, we obviously have a legal team that advises the police department with those. And so with me not knowing the case that you're talking about and being familiar with it, I will tell you that we rely on our legal advice if there's a legal question as to whether or not something needs to be released. And if it's not being released, it's not because we're trying to hide or we're trying to express some lack of transparency. It's just simply that the legal issues need to be resolved by the legal experts. And whoever is requesting this information has legal experts on their side that's requesting it, and the whole thing needs to be properly adjudicated.
I have here a letter that states something very contrary to the policy that we developed. We, the community people, developed a policy on transparency and the release of body cam footage. And this letter says, no, you cannot have this information based on 50A, and that's illegal. And so I think if the police department hasn't gotten this information from the city administration, you guys better do it, okay?
Well, and I appreciate that. And again, I don't know what the legal issues are, but I would simply say this. My direction to my staff has been that we will comply with the law. And if the law requires us to release information, whether it's body cam information or whether it's a police report or whatever it may be, then we comply with the law. Now, sometimes there are some legal questions. You have legal experts who disagree on what the legal issue is. And when stuff like that happens, then I fully expect that whoever is asking for this information has some competent legal counsel. We have competent legal counsel on the police department side, and that there's an appropriate judicial process to determine how it's going to be released at that point. But again, I'm not familiar with
the court's already said you can't do it.
Okay,
right. So we're going to get.
There's an individual matter that you want to discuss.
Well, the topic is the reorganization. Here,
Right.
very, very valid concern, transparency, and what you're talking about, Dr. Green. But let's talk about what we came here to talk about. All right, there's a limited amount of time.
No, but again, I mean, the point is made, but on an individual case or something specific like that, we can probably discuss it later on, but right now we'd like to get every...
case, it's a policy.
Okay.
It's a policy that's been spelled out, that we cannot have that information.
Okay, that's something, again, for you to discuss on an individual basis. Right now, we'd like other people to be involved in this.
2 questions, that's it. So, and it's not going to be back and forth and back.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a comment in regards to the decision-making process. I listened to you mention about the committee, and you had APD on the committee. You guys also reached out to some folks in California to analyze problems. And I really feel that going forward, if you're making changes to shift resources and reorganize, I believe that you should include our common council members. They should have a seat at the table. Folks like me, when I have an issue, especially as far as Swan and Third, I'm picking up that phone, I'm calling Councilmember Love, Councilmember Robinson, Councilmember Kimbrough, calling him plenty of times. So I think it's very important to have these folks that we elected to represent us, to be at the table, because they can share things that you guys may not know, because we're constantly calling them in regards to our issues and looking for resolution.
Yes. Thank you. And just quick answer to that. Yes, I agree. And moving forward, I think that there's some opportunities to do things a little bit different as it pertains to participation, and we're fully aware of that. Thank you.
Mr. Rivera?
I'll wait. Because I don't want to go ahead and continue to interrupt, if I may.
I'm not gonna. One question, he'll answer it. All right, and we're not gonna go back and forth because there are a lot of folks in here with their hands up behind you.
I'm
all right,
not gonna go back and forth. I just want to say, I just have questions in regarding to the salary. If those changes going to take place, because in my mind, and that is the question, but in my mind, if the officers doesn't have or feel comfortable with the pay, then what's coming down the pipeline? They don't have proper gear to deal with the community, you know what I mean? Or the proper resources in order to go ahead and follow up with the community. So, is that going on in the department now? And let's talking about people, y'all might have outdated guns, or you might have outdated uniform stuff, or I've heard that before in the city of Albany, and I just wanted to know, are we there again? Basically.
And yes, they have to negotiate, the officers' union, because it's a unionized environment, they have to negotiate with the city for salary and wages and benefits. And so they're working that piece out right now. There's some internal things within the officers' union that they're working out at this point. But certainly, and I'll say it, I've said it before, and I'll say it publicly now, they need to be fairly compensated for this job.
But they also need to be protected with the proper equipment.
Yeah,
yes.
That's precisely what I'm saying.
Yes.
That's the only way that you're going to get other people that going to even think about coming to the police department with all the issues that's happening in our society today.
Yes.
Okay, gentlemen, will you stand up when you ask your question?
Yes. Sure, I'm Harvey with the newspaper, downtown Albany. Just wondering, now we talk about Arbor Hill for a moment, back-to-back shootings in the last couple of nights, actually 3 nights. As far as the distribution of patrols and beat officers, how is that going to affect Arbor Hill specifically, and also the South End? It seem to be the most dangerous neighborhoods in Albany, apparently. So I understand that there's traffic violation problems, police officers treating other people badly in some cases. But what about Arbor Hill and the South End? What are the plans for that? Those two communities.
I think it's important with that, and Dr. Robinson talked about the importance of having, when those types of strategies are developed, to making sure that we have, the community members that are involved be involved with us as we talk about some of those issues. I was talking to Councilwoman Love earlier today, and what we pledged to do within the next 2 weeks is we're going to have a meeting right now so that we can discuss some of the challenges in her ward and in some of the other wards where we've had some challenges, so we can talk about what our strategies are as a community in terms of addressing those right now before we get into our warmer months. So I think that's one piece of it, is making sure that we're engaging with, as we always do, with the community with some of these problems and developing strategies. But the bigger plan with this is this gives us an opportunity to have much more flexibility in terms of the deployment of officers. Because now we have more officers who will be dedicated to just regular road patrol work. These officers are going to be, just like Lieutenant McDade said, they're going to be helping and working with and being integrated into regular NEU, neighborhood engagement, our community policing, our beat officers. They're going to be working with those officers. But those officers also have an opportunity now to do some of the things I talked about earlier in the presentation. They have an opportunity now to go and do more regular patrolling, proactive patrolling. At the beginning of their shift, when they get information about some issues that may have happened on the prior shift, instead of going from run to run to run, back to back to back, now those officers are going to get a chance to go out and just kind of go through some of these areas that may have had some challenges either just before or even a longer period of time before that. So it gives us a lot more flexibility.
Is there a map that's going to be available?
He's got a map. Ms. Johnson?
One of my follow-up questions, because there was a time, and I know how to reach Kelly and other people on the council, but I like to deal with the officer at hand because I want to see what they're going to do with it. But my question is, how does a layperson build a relationship with the community officer or the officer in the neighborhood? You know, will there be a mechanism to do so, or how would that happen? And I'm sorry, I missed the part of the question.
Talk about that, Joe.
That's a good question. So one of the ways we measure success with a BCOP is the relationships he or she has out in the community. And one of the things we want to strengthen that relationship. We want you to know your BCOP. If you have a neighbor association meeting, the BCOPs are required to go to them. You can meet the BCOP there. You can exchange information, and you can get on an email each other back and forth, each other back and forth. If you go on the website where you live and you find out where your BCOP is, send him or her an email saying you want to meet them for coffee. Kind of get face to face, know who each other are. Tell he or she where you live, and you guys can get that rapport going on. Because you're 100% right. The BCOP success is based on the relationships. And when the BCOPs can move around a little bit, we want them to go out and create relationships. With the relationships, they can help solve problems for you.
So to go online,
it's the easiest way. Or if you want after the meeting, we can talk and I can tell you who your BCOP is. And I can give you that BCOP's information if you want.
Mr. Walston?
Yeah, very quickly. So, as an Albany resident, I would like the community not to pathologize communities. Now, I heard someone say that area is the most dangerous. Now, lack of resources is different. And if the Albany Police Department is committed to the Albany community, then we want to make sure that officers are not coming in there pathologizing communities, that in the training that you're talking about what marginalization looks like, we're talking about implicit bias, right? But if we are talking about two communities that are the most dangerous and don't have any factual, not unless you all have said it, and not unless the council people have said that they are in fear of their own community, I would say to the media, do not put that out there in the community, okay? Do not pathologize communities. Because if this is supposed to be a collective thing and supposed to be serving all the residents of Albany, then every community is healthy and safe. If you need more resources, then you talk about resources, but do not pathologize communities.
Okay, just Mr. Waltz.
Yeah. Just a couple things, Chief. I think, and just speak to the presentation, I think there's no one here that wants to see this fail. Let's say that up front. We recognize you're trying to come up with creative ways to work with different neighborhoods better, keep the streets safe. That's your job. We want you to succeed at that job. We're glad that you're doing that job. That said, the things that you need to be able to do that job to keep the officers here, as you said, are myriad. We really can't get past money. So, I mean, we all work. We work for a reason. We all have bills. We all have bills to get paid. You do a job where, not like me, you have a really high risk of getting shot. To me, you should be paid a little bit more than I get because I don't have that risk. Okay? What I hear is you have a lot of support coming from here. You're hearing support coming from you. But there's this piece up here that I'm not sure is on the same page. And I don't see them here. The common, that's great, but it's the administration above that that needs to be on board with that. And I'm still waiting to hear them say, given how many years it's been since the police have a contract, and I says as a union person who's waiting for his contract, let's get it done. Okay? that said, given the fact that we now have the new bail, the form laws, we do have the ESCO very probably have that done quicker. And this was not an impact that I think you didn't plan for, at least when this whole thing started. What is the added strain that places on the resources you had planned to divert to be able to do more street work, take them now off the street and focusing more on this portion? What is the added percentage? I mean, how much staff are we talking about that you now have to account for in addition to what you had?
So right now, we're gonna temporarily assign 2 or 3 officers to assist with discovery right now, just to get us through this period right now. The plan going forward, and we've worked this out with city administration, is to hire some civilian employees to help us with that discovery process, with the administrative piece of that. So that way we don't have to divert so many officers to that. We still have to divert some, because there's some materials that are sensitive in nature that a sworn officer can only have access to. So we still have to have that, but we're confident that we can have some more civilians to help us out with that piece, to relieve that pressure.
Okay, ma'am. Yes.
Hi, my name is Deborah Brown Johnson, and I'm the president of the Albany branch in NAACP. And my question centers on what are your plans for assessing the effectiveness of this new structure, and what's your timetable around that?
You know, thank you. I'm brief that up. And this is the other piece, and I'll let Joe talk about that piece.
ACPAC, our only purpose is community policing in the city of Albany. That's our only focus at anything. So when there's a change like this, we're going to be taking a look at data, contacts, all the information, probably do a survey, but we want to keep an eye on what is going on in the community now, how community policing is working now, and then as this program goes through, because it's just getting started, I mean, they're just getting the teams out. Let's see what happens after they get out. We want to look at, are the officers getting out 20 minutes a day? Are they meeting people? Are they attending the meetings? The team concept for community policing can work. Is it going to work? You know, we have to give them credit that they're trying something. They have to do that with the staffing they have. But ACPAC will be looking at this over the next year. And then when we see something that has to change or that we think has to change, and this is coming from the community, not just a few people on the committee, but from the community as well, we'll advise the police department. We'll say, this is working well, this isn't working so well. You might want to look at this. We'll be having more meetings like this and get information from the community as well. So ACPAC members will be out contacting people. ACPAC members will be in the community, going to meetings, and looking at the data too. It's not just what people have to say, even though that's important. It's also looking at the data, what's being done and what isn't being done. And as we go through this over the next year, we'll be getting back to you on that as well.
Let me just follow up on Joe. And based on ACPAC's assessment, their measurement of whatever metrics that are put together, if changes need to be made, we'll make those adjustments.
Okay, so Mr. Conti, then Ms. Doche, then Ms. Fahey. Mr. Conti.
Yeah, kind of an observation of just looking on the website I looked the other day, just checked again as far as the beat maps and the assigned officers, which I think is more than we've had in the past. But I noticed the contact information in the list is just email addresses. Is there an intent to use phone contacts?
Yes, phone numbers were provided. If they're not on there, I'll look into that, absolutely.
Okay, so we will be putting that.
100%, yeah.
Okay. And just, I'm still not sure how to feel about this reorg, because to me it looks like you're expanding the beat zones and getting us less officers to cover those zones. So, just an observation, that's some of the feedback I get from my neighbors as well.
I appreciate that, and we're going to work hard to change their thoughts, the thought process on that. I'm confident that we're going to give you a better product going forward. Better trained officers, patrol officers participating in the team policing concept, and the days off changed for your area as well, which is a fantastic thing. You have cops Friday and Saturdays now.
Yeah, we'll see how.
Right? That was something we wanted for a while.
Ms. Doche?
Could you go back to the prior slide? I feel like I'm missing a big part of this presentation and the provision of information here. So some of my questions are about, okay, how many police officers total were doing the neighborhood engagement, assigned to the neighborhood engagement? How many, ideally, are, when you're fully implemented, are going to be covering those beats?
19.
How many patrolled units? If we're talking about people being teams, it sounds like there's overlapping patrol assigned areas, and I'm a little unclear about where those patrol areas are, if there's going to be some level of consistency. How many people are currently on patrol now, and how many are going to be, and how many teams are there going to be? So that's some of the information, but I also want to just point out, I don't think we've really covered how we're going to achieve these expected outcomes of less stress, more job satisfaction, more positive recruitment and retention environment, increased focus on traffic safety. I haven't heard anything about how that's going to occur with this. And I think that we need to see some of those numbers that I'm talking about in terms of how many more patrols. And finally, I want to say we're down 50. So I think we would like to see where you want to be ultimately when you're fully staffed, but also what are you doing in the short term, and when are we going to be up to full staff? All of that is missing.
Okay, the organizational structure, the new one, we have it on the back. So if you want to look and see what it looks like right now, where the officers are assigned, where they've been diverted to, you can see that, and that's all on the back table. 13 officers. 13 officers were diverted from the neighborhood engagement unit back to various areas. Those officers were reassigned to regular patrol, training, the detective office, and patrol, training, detective office, and traffic safety.
So do you have a chart of that?
Yes, and the chart is back there.
Is there
that shows.
something you can hand out and send to us?
Sure.
Put online?
Yep.
Those officers are just positions.
Pardon me?
Those were positions that were transferred because they weren't actually patrol at the time of this reorganization.
Correct. So those are
Positions were taken from the NEU unit and placed, those are still vacant.
correct. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, Ms. Fahey.
Thank you. Hi, Chief.
Hi.
I think this, the problem-solving approach to policing makes so much sense, and that's what I think we've been about for quite a few years here. I'm glad that patrol is going to be much more engaged in that approach. One of the things you talked about them coming out of their cars for that period of time. What was it again? 20 minutes.
20 minutes.
And you talked about them addressing hot spots, but I also want to say that such an important part of community policing is a preventive approach, and I immediately think of how important the neighborhood engagement unit has been with the youth of our city. The ward that I represent, our officers, our neighborhood engagement officers are out there, getting to know the youth in the neighborhoods, and they're able to form those relationships early on, positive role models and so on and so forth. So it's not always just those hot spots, it's those engaging people early on, engaging our youth, and preventing problems from ever happening. So if you could speak to that a little bit, is that part of the training?
So that is part of the training. One of the ideas with the patrolmen getting out of the car is we're looking for non-custodial engagements, meaning we want them to meet the community in like a non-arrest function. Get out, engage the youth, engage the residents, have conversations, and get to meet people and make relationships. So the idea behind the patrol, even in a hotspot, we're not looking for them to go out and make arrests, unless something happens in front of them, they have to. We're looking to engage people in hotspots and non-hotspots to create those relationships. By doing that, that can and will cut down on crime during that time. there's research out there that says a non-custodial engagement conversation is just as effective, if not more, than writing a traffic ticket or making an arrest on that same intersection.
Absolutely, thank you.
Can I also say one more thing real quick? With regards to patrol officers, all patrol officers patrol in a team. They get to pick the team they want to work in. An example, like Team A is like Central Avenue and West Hill. Cars 101, 103, 107, 108. Ideally, every day, we want the officers to be in the same team, and they are. That's how we're going to go forward with the team policing concept. Those team cops will be working with the beat cop in their area.
Ms. Love.
Well, I just want to reiterate one of the questions Ms. Beatty. I cannot see an officer getting out his car on the corner of on the corner of Justin and Second, when there's 30 to 40 people standing there drugging and drinking. I don't see that.
Sure.
I don't see.
We have to address that problem first. We have to address that problem first. So the officer, the beat cop works by himself.
Exactly.
The beat cop that works Second and Judson is on that corner. He's rolling on his bike or he's walking by. We're expecting the cop to do the same thing. What we want is the cop and the beat cop to get together on Second and Judson and start working on why are the groups hanging out here? What can we do to get the groups to not hang out here? So part of the idea in the training that the officers have in the Brigade Unit is called CEPTEC, Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. Perhaps the officers that have that training can address that area and look at other things, lighting, cutting back the trees. We cut back or cut down a couple of trees in that corner to give us better visibility. So we have to address the bigger problem, but the cop is going to get out. They're going to be doing it. Just like the beat cop's doing it every day. He's riding a bike. You remember Justin Wallace?
Yeah, I know Justin Wallace.
He was out there. He's still a community service officer, but he was out there every day.
But Justin Wallace is very known in the community.
That's right.
Very known in the community.
That's right.
He knows his community inside and out.
Fantastic.
But he had to start somewhere.
He's awesome. We want to continue that. We want to build those
Nobody knew
relationships.
when he started. He had to start somewhere.
Danielle.
So my question would be, there's been a lot of statements about community policing, and you said a couple of times that going forward, we're going to include the community. I want to know how this is going to happen. Like, it's not even how. I want an assurance. I want an actual assurance. Because APPEC was here before the reorganization occurred. They did not sit on the reorganization committee. We were spoken to afterwards. I don't remember anyone agreeing that this was how we wanted to see things go forward. There's been a lot of community members that have said this is not what they want. And if I remember correctly, Deputy Chief Hogan's exact words were, this is what the community wanted, but we weren't really involved in this. So how can you assure us that going forward, we're actually going to be involved, even though we should have been involved in community policing from the beginning, because it's community policing?
So, just like I think I responded to Dr. Robinson, I think there was an opportunity to do things better here, and I think we missed an opportunity. Now, I think that the outcome, I'm fairly pleased with the outcome, but the process, I think there was an opportunity, and I readily concede that. We missed the mark in a certain way on how this was all happening. So going forward, we learned a lesson. And that's part of sometimes when you're going through stuff like this. When I came in here in September of 2018, my thought process was I'm going to go to every neighborhood association meeting. I'm going to go to every community meeting I can go to. I'm going to talk to people informally, formally. I'm going to talk to people at the corners, wherever I can be, so I can get a sense of what people prioritized in public safety. And I was going to take what I learned, and take it back to the police department and mandate to my officers that they use those priorities in terms of fashioning a system that can relieve pressure and also make a system that we already have even more impactful. The outcome, I think, is okay. The process, I think we could have done different. I missed it. Being new to the community, I think that there was me not knowing exactly how this community wanted to process all this. I missed it. And so I think the way to going forward is to say that I learned a lesson. And so going forward, I think that there's some opportunities when things like this happen to do things a little different.
I just have one quick follow-up, and I'm sorry, I know it was one
I
question.
know one question, but
no,
there are
it's
people
not-
that have had their hands up for you, ma'am, and then you, Mr. Solomon.
My name is Suzanne Moss, and I am on the, we don't have a president of our neighborhood association, we have a board. I know you've come and spoken with us. We are Upper New Scotland. I'm confused about something that keeps being said, and that is that the patrol officer will work with the beat officer, but we don't have a beat officer, so how does that happen?
Joe, you want to talk about? Sure. So the areas that don't have a beat officer are going to see an increased presence of the officer walking the beat. So you have a community service officer. You're up in Scotland Avenue. I think that's Danny Biat, right?
Yes, we used to have Brooks. Brooks would send us a report every month telling us
Sure.
what was going on in the neighborhood.
So Danny Biat's going to
We
do that
don't,
for you.
we don't get any of that.
So we're going to get that back for you. Officer Biat's going to take care of that for you. He's going to talk to the patrol officers in the area. And yes, he will not be walking the beat with the patrol officer, but you will have patrol officers in your area walking the beat out there. It may not be with the beat cop because your area doesn't have a beat cop per se, but you do have a community service officer. Danny Biat, and he will continue that level of service that Officer Brooks gave you. We can get that. He's here today. You can talk to him.
I realize that, but it's not that level of service, I can tell you right now.
Let's work on making it that level and making it better.
Number
We can
two,
do that.
you're talking about salaries. These officers need higher pay. There's no question about it. And how long have they been without a contract? So don't talk to me about how the union is talking to management and management's talking to the union, because somebody's not talking here. It wouldn't be 5 years. I worked for the state of New York. I would never go 5 years without a contract. That's unacceptable. Totally.
Mr. Sullivan.
Under the reorganization plan, how is the reorganizational plan going to focus on reducing the number of guns among our youth and dealing with the issue just recently this weekend? We had these drive-by shootings down on South Swan Street, and they're how specifically is this reorganization, or during this reorganization, would you be addressing those issues? Because for 20 years, we've had gun buyback programs. Okay, they used to have them on Saturdays. Pastor Charlie would be conducting them with D.A. Soares. And there's as many guns on the streets now as there were 20 years ago. So we're not, we're somehow not making an impact. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, is there an answer? Can we get guns off the streets in our neighborhoods? Because really it drives people out of the city. A lot of good people, especially when they're raising their families, they do not want their children and parents killed or murdered, okay, as a result of gun violence. So,
And it's just a real quick answer to that, two-pronged answer to it. Number one, we've got to find out where these weapons are coming from. These weapons are coming from outside of Albany, and they're coming into the city. We just recovered a gun from a young man a few days ago, and this gun was stolen out of Florida. It wasn't too long ago that we took another gun off somebody, and it was from some other southern state that was stolen. Some of these guns are bought legally and given to somebody and transported to all these different areas in different states. So the first thing is we've got to get a hold on where these guns are coming from, and that's why it's so important for us to maintain these partnerships with our federal partners. We have very, very strong partnerships with the DEA and the FBI and ATF and some of these other federal agencies that can help us track these weapons through the various states. So that's number one. But number two, and the more troubling part of this, is why do we have young men and young women feel that they can use these weapons in order to resolve conflicts. What's happened? What's happened in a 13-year-old's life where he or she feels that it's okay to do that this is the way to do it? So it's the larger piece of this is we've got to figure out what's driving this from a social standpoint. What's happening with our families, what's happening with education, what's happening with mental health. I mean, so many, we think of mental health and we think older people, but you know what? There are a lot of undiagnosed 12 or 13-year-olds also. Are we doing enough as a society to help those young people to navigate this? Are we giving enough to our parents? We got some parents that are doing a lot of things, good people, but for whatever reason, maybe they need some type of assistance in helping their young people navigate. Are we doing enough with that? So we got to figure out where the guns are coming from. We got to deal with the social issues that are driving it.
Mr. Bauer?
First and foremost, thank you for being here. I want to thank the residents for being here, especially the ones with the little ones. I think it's important that we have their voices here and viewing some of these changes. My question has to do with the 20 minutes that we're going to have officers coming, walking the beat. Is it going to be each shift we'll have an officer walking the beat? Is it going to be 19 officers each shift are going to be walking the beat? Are they going to be rotated so every day we have a different officer walking the beat? As well as if the beat officer is not available, are we still going to have a patrol officer walk the beat by themselves for those 20 minutes?
So it's going to be on two shifts, the 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. shift and the 4 p.m. to midnight shift. And the idea is the patrol officers are assigned to teams, so you may likely have the same officer a couple days in a row doing the foot patrol, which is what we want. We want the same officers in the same areas doing the foot patrols. And yes, if a beat cop is on duty, I instructed them when the patrolman or patrolwoman calls out for a foot patrol, if there's a beat cop on duty in that area, he or she is required to hook up with that officer and walk the beat with them.
But what if there's no beat officer available?
Then they're going to walk the beat by themselves. The same as what the beat cop does every day. The beat cops walk the beat by themselves. A patrol officer can walk the beat by themselves in 20 minutes. And it'll be all 19 cars on that shift. And obviously it won't be all at once. The sergeants are going to coordinate when they go out on the foot patrols based on call buying in certain parts of the city.
How do you guarantee their safety?
Anybody can
I know, but if you're going to post who's walking where, when.
The officers are trained. They're trained. They're going to do the best to keep themselves safe. Take whatever measures. A cop every day is cautious, so they're going to do the best they can to keep themselves safe. We're not going to put our officers in a harm's way. Again, the beat cop walks the beat all day by himself or herself. So what we're asking the patrol officers to do is nothing different than the beat cop does. It's just for a much shorter time. They don't have the time to do it all day because they're answering call to call to call. So we're just going to take them out for 20 minutes.
So when they're out for 20 minutes, who's covering their calls?
Other officers.
Okay. I do have a legitimate question. I have talked to officers just, walking, and our cameras, our pictures are very grainy. They're not quality. Oftentimes, more times than not, they cannot be used in criminal cases because the pictures are so unclear. As the city moves towards getting internet, isn't it something that we could upgrade our cameras, link, and utilize some people who monitor those cameras to more effectively and efficiently use the police force that is on patrol during those hours?
Are you referring to private cameras or city cameras?
City cameras.
I would have to talk to somebody who knows more about that, but yes, if they're not...
I've heard the pictures are terrible and they really can't really do
I don't know for a fact. I mean, I believe you, but I find that to be hard to believe because it's a city camera. We use it to prosecute people, so I would definitely have to ask and look into that for you.
And maybe more of them are needed, and instead of being reactive, if you've got people monitoring these cameras and their live feed, you can better utilize your resources and maybe make it everything more efficient and safer for
Monitoring
everybody.
the camera's live feed would be a substantial
Investment.
personnel issue.
We'll move on. Mr. Conti?
Thanks. A question about some time issues. So the NEU shifts are pretty much 8 a.m. to 4 to 4 p.m. The patrol officers that will then be getting out, are they going to do those same hours, or will they be later? Like my area can go with that, or later past midnight, going on some of those.
Sure.
Is that going to give you the flexibility of those patrol officers and the cars that get out and walk? Will they be at times after you might have an NEU shift?
So you're talking about from midnight on.
Yeah.
Midnight on would be something separate, independent of what we're talking about right now. The protocol we're talking about right now will be 8 a.m. to midnight, but your area has a need for officers out walking to be after midnight. So that's something we specifically can discuss with you and maybe, put something together for your area to meet your needs.
Okay, but then I guess the answer would be that the team police and patrol officers, their shift in effect will coincide with any new shifts.
Correct.
And will be coordinated that way, it won't be outside those shifts.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, sure. So what if, again, thank you for this presentation, it's very underground from the community. What if, with the reorganization, the beat officers are just not establishing that connection with their community? Where you hear that they're not really doing what's best with this reorganization, they're not up to standard with previous beat officers.
Sure.
What is the process for giving feedback for that and making sure that the community voice is heard?
So with the reorganization, one of the things that we talked to the chief about was want to maintain the supervision.
You should repeat
Can you
the
repeat her question and then
There's some
answer
noise
it?
in the back that people didn't quiet.
She was asking, how are we going to hold B cops accountable if they're not maintaining that relationship with the community, if they're not receptive to the relationship, and how can we ensure that they're maintaining the same level of service or standards as the previous B cop? One of the things with the reorganization that I'd asked for to be considered was supervision. I have 4 sergeants that are supervising B cops, 2 on the day shift and 2 on the 412 shift. So the accountability is there. The sergeants will hold the B cops accountable. And she's asking as well, how can the community be heard if they're not, making those relationships with B cop? Reach out to the sergeants. We will look into that. It could be a training issue. Maybe the B cop needs to be trained in something certain, or maybe the B cop doesn't realize he or she's not making those relationships. But I would say reach out to the NEU supervisors, and we could address those issues.
And also, just to add to that, ACPAC is going to be heavily involved with this, with assessing and evaluating effectiveness and stuff like that. And so we're going to be, my staff and I are going to be listening very closely to the recommendations from ACPAC as we move forward. And as I said before, based upon ACPAC's recommendations, if things need to be changed, if things need to be adjusted, if we need to enhance something, whatever it is, we're going to make the appropriate adjustments.
Okay, so one last question.
So, I could and ask, can you please put the supervisor's information up on the webpage
Yes.
so we can contact them? And
Sure.
my question is actually, so historically, when there's events or something going on, the beat officers have been pulled to work those. We're now less beat officers with larger geographical. Are they going to continue to be pulled from our neighborhood to work at these events and other things going on in the city? Because we routinely lose them already, and now we have less.
You're referring to like the community events, like the pop-ups and stuff?
Well, it's not just the pop-ups. Like when there's something going on in the plaza, they're pulled. When there's something going on in Washington Park, they're pulled. They're, anytime when there's stuff, more stuff going on downtown at the Times Union or over at the Palace, there's more of them are pulled from our neighborhoods. Or, there's been instances where there's something going on in another neighborhood, and they pull all of our beat officers. So now that we have less beat officers with larger geographical areas, are you guys going to continue to temporarily reassign them out of our neighborhoods?
And I think the pressure to do that is going to be substantially lessened. And I say that because before, with the old structure that we had, there were fewer patrol officers and fewer officers in other parts of the organization to cover those things. And so if there's a large event that's happening in the city, we have to have a certain amount of officers to work it. And if we don't, then we have to pull from whatever resources we have. And so with this structure, that pressure is going to be lessened tremendously, because now we have so many other officers in other places to cover that. Now, I probably can't say that it'll never happen, because we don't know what scale of event is coming here, and we don't know what other kind of issues are happening. But I think as a general statement, I think it's fair to say that type of stress is going to be substantially lessened.
So you believe with shifting 14 positions that we should no longer be seeing our neighborhood beat officers pulled from our neighborhoods from the residents?
No, I don't. Again, I'm not saying that it'll never happen.
Right, but we should see less of that.
Correct.
All right.
Are there any other questions on this? We appreciate you all coming and giving the feedback. Spread the word, get it out. This is an ongoing thing we're going to be looking at. The community should be giving feedback through your
council members,
through your elected people, through ACPAC, contacting supervisors. The word that we have to get out is there's changes happening. Everybody isn't happy about them. A lot of people just don't know what's happening. You have to get the word out that these changes are happening. Let's take a look at it and be vocal about it. Okay? ACPAC can't make recommendations unless we hear from people.
Do we have dates for future meetings?
We'll be getting information out. There's another forum coming up, I think in 2 months. But the forums are only one thing. We're looking for people right now and trying to set up on how we're going to do this evaluation of the police department. The chief has been, the chief has been very good about saying we're going to have full access to all the information we need. So we're going to be looking at, are the patrols out there walking? We're going to be looking at the number of people and where they are. These are things that have to be looked at because that's community policing. We need them in the community. So we'll look at that. We'll report back to the community on it when we start getting information. We're going to have to come up with some other ways of giving information back out to the community. ACPAC hasn't been doing a lot of that in the past. We've got to do a little bit more of that now. So we'll try to get more social media out and more information out in other ways as well.
Meetings like this again?
We have 4 forums a year where we have meetings like this. We also have our public business meetings that are open to the public. Okay, and we do those in different neighborhoods at each time we move around the city. Okay, our other, pardon me? We'll get it out in the paper. We'll get it out as many ways as we can. Okay, we also have a website. Alice has.
No, I'm just going back to my original question is, what is the public access to the body cam? I mean, we developed the policy, and now we're being told, according to the policy, that we can't have access to the body cam.
Okay, again, I think the chief tried to answer that as much as he could. If there's an individual case, wait a minute, if there's an individual case, we'll look at an individual case. I'm sure you're looking at it.
I'm talking about the policy. How do I get access to a body cam footage? Simple.
Is this policy public information? Body cam policy?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
It's public information. It's on. Okay.
I would follow with the corporation counsel's office.
Well, I know what they said. They just sent a policy out saying you can't have it. That's my problem, you see. You can't have it. Why did we develop a policy on access? I know there's a policy, but if we're not following it, what good is it? I spent all my time developing the policy, and now they're not following it.
Okay, if it's a public policy, we'll take a look at that as well.
Okay, I got all the
Quick recommendation for upcoming forums. I think it would be great if we had them located more in the downtown area, or at least a couple there, because a lot of us drove here today. Those people are using public transit.
Yeah.
I'm sure they'd like to be a part of this as well. So
We've done forums, South End, Westville.
yeah, okay.
We'll do it. We don't do them in the same area of the city each time. It'll be someplace different every time.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay?